Here's a deeper dive into said technology. And once again, they didn't discuss, like, okay, if fluid creates friction, and when I first started trying to understand this technology, like years and years ago, I took a 5-gallon bucket, used salt water, a magnet, and a car charger. And I would develop a static charge so large that, just know that the water rotating in a bucket would create friction. Your veins, as well, it doesn't mention, it says just iron. And iron, although conductive, it's more magnetic than it is anything else. But in your blood, there's potassium as well. It's not just iron and water, it's potassium, iron, and water. And potassium is very conductive and very electromagnetically reflective. I'm just going to throw that out there. As well, okay, don't freak out at the end, all right? Don't watch until the end if you're going to get freaked out about technological alien life or non-biological life. If you don't want to hear about it, you should probably stop now, I guess, probably. But here's a deeper dive into the tech and how it's possible that you are an antenna and stuff. It's fun for me. It's enjoyable for you. This is for entertainment purposes only. Don't freak the fuck out. Okay? All right, guys? Enjoy.
What if I told you that the beating of your own human heart, a theoretical faster-than-light warp drive, and an invisible wall of static electricity inside a 1980s tape factory all operate on the exact same hidden laws of physics?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd on the surface, right? But the stack of notes we are analyzing today argues that this isn't science fiction. It is, well, it's absolute mechanical reality.
Welcome to this custom deep dive for you, the learner. Today's mission is to explore a highly complex, frankly really unconventional stack of SORC material.
Yeah, we're talking about documents that weave together cutting-edge tabletop physics, bizarre industrial accidents, human biology, and some massive theories about suppressed technology.
Right, and before we jump in, we need to make a very clear disclaimer. These sources contain intense, sometimes highly politically charged claims, stuff about government cover-ups, weaponized networks, legal conspiracies.
Exactly. And we want to be incredibly clear up front. We are not taking sides here.
No, not at all.
We aren't endorsing these viewpoints. Our job today is strictly to act as your guides, just to understand the provocative and interconnected ideas presented in this text. We're really just here to follow the thread.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how something as massive as a warp drive connects to your own biology, we have to start with the foundational physics concept that anchors this entire theory.
Right, the Zeldovich effect.
The notes refer to this as the engine of reality. So let's start with normal everyday physics, just to set a baseline. Usually, if you take a solid metal cylinder and you put it inside an electromagnetic field, it creates drag.
Yeah, it generates electrical resistance.
And it loses energy by heating up, right? It basically acts like a brake.
That is the standard expectation, yeah.
Yeah.
The metal absorbs the energy. But in the 1970s, a physicist named Yakov Zeldovich theorized a loophole.
Okay.
He proposed taking that metal cylinder and spinning it incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Well, the mathematical theory states that if the cylinder's mechanical rotation frequency surpasses the frequency of the incoming electromagnetic wave, this bizarre flip happens in the physics.
A flip?
Yeah, the electrical resistance actually drops below zero.
Negative resistance. I've always liked the analogy of pushing a kid on a swing for this.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because normally if you stop pushing, the swing slows down due to friction, but negative resistance is like pushing the kid, and suddenly the swing starts generating its own windstorm.
Right.
And it starts pushing you back with far more force than you originally put in.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly.
All right.
The spinning metal itself ceases to be a brake. It becomes an active power source.
Wow.
It magnifies the incoming waves using its own rotational kinetic energy as the fuel. And recently, researchers have actually managed to create a tabletop version of this in the lab.
A physical version?
Yes. They call it an electromagnetic laser.
Wait, but if this machine just keeps amplifying a wave, and that wave bounces back and gets amplified again and again in a positive feedback loop, doesn't it just blow up?
It absolutely would.
The sources call this a black hole bomb effect, which sounds terrifying.
A runaway explosion of energy is a very real threat in this scenario. So, to prevent the cylinder from melting or the system from just tearing itself apart, scientists can't let the waves bounce off a perfect mirror.
Okay, so what did they use?
The lab setup surrounds the spinning cylinder with an adjustable magnetic coil assembly. It acts as a leaky mirror.
I'm going to need an ELI 5 for that. Explain it like I'm 5. How does a leaky mirror stop a bomb?
Well, the leaky mirror uses 3 stabilizing mechanisms. First is phase shift tuning. Think of it like pushing that swing, but pushing slightly off rhythm to actively dampen the momentum.
Ah, so you're fighting the swing a little bit.
Exactly. The coils monitor the wave and reflect it slightly out of phase. That creates destructive interference to cool down sudden spikes.
Makes sense. What's the second?
Second is impedance matching. This acts as a spillover valve.
Okay.
If the field builds too fast, the system automatically diverts the excess current into a separate damping reservoir. And finally, there is magnetic core saturation.
Meaning the physical material of the coils just hits a hard limit?
Correct. Picture a sponge that can only hold so much water. Once the magnetic field hits a certain strength, the coils physically cannot reflect any more energy back at the cylinder.
So they just stop working as a mirror.
They become transparent to the wave, allowing the excess energy to just bleed off into a coherent, stable output beam.
That's wild.
It's profound, really, because it demonstrates that raw mechanical rotational movement can directly synthesize and magnify a pure electromagnetic field. You don't need a massive particle accelerator to do this.
If you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, okay, a tabletop experiment spinning a metal cylinder is neat, but how does that equal a warp drive or a force field?
Right, it seems like a big jump.
Huge jump. But the sources argue that this isn't just lab theory. They point to a very specific factory accident in 1980 at a 3M plant in South Carolina. Can you lay out what happened there?
Sure, and it is a heavily documented industrial anomaly. So, picture a massive factory floor making tape.
Like packing tape.
Basically. They have these 20-foot wide rolls of polypropylene film unwinding at immense speeds.
How fast?
About 1,000 feet per minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, incredibly fast. And because of how the film was routed through the machinery, pulling up, across, and down, it formed this massive 20-foot-high tent shape.
And the text claims this geometry, combined with that high-speed rotation, acted as a macroscopic Zeldovich effect. Like, it became a giant cavity resonator.
Exactly. The friction generated an electrostatic charge estimated at somewhere between 300 and 500 kilovolts per foot.
Which is an astronomical amount of localized energy.
Completely off the charts. The result was that workers on the floor hit an actual physical invisible wall.
Wait, really? A wall of air?
A wall of static. The air inside that tent geometry became so densely charged and polarized, they created a repulsive mechanical force. The workers reported being able to lean their entire body weight against empty air and be physically pushed back.
That is insane. The sources refer to this invisible wall as space-time stiffening, and they claim it was an accidental demonstration of the Alcubierre warp metric.
They do.
But hold on. I know the Alcubierre drive is a theoretical concept for bending space-time. It's from science fiction. How does static electricity in a tape factory relate to gravity and space-time?
Well, an Alcubierre drive works by bending space-time to allow faster-than-light travel. But the mathematics require an incredibly dense region of energy to create a wall of negative pressure in front of the ship.
Okay, so you need a lot of energy in one spot.
Right. And what the sources are arguing is that in 1980, that 3M factory inadvertently created an electromagnetic field gradient so unbelievably steep that it physically mimicked that exact spatial distortion.
So the energy was so dense it actually messed with space.
The localized energy density was so high that it stiffened the fabric of space itself in that room.
I mean, are these sources genuinely arguing that a plastic tape factory built a force field by accident just by stumbling into the right geometry? And that this was used as a blueprint for government tech?
They are absolutely arguing that. The documents point to recent DARPA-funded research led by a scientist named Sonny White from late 2025 and early 2026.
Okay, what did he do?
The text claims this Casimir research proved the mechanics of a microscopic warp bubble. Researchers placed a tiny 1-micron sphere inside a 4-micron cylinder.
There's that specific geometry again, cylinder and sphere.
Yes, and that precise geometry generated the exact negative energy density needed to bend space at a microscopic level.
Oh, wow.
Latest data in these notes shows a shift toward what they call tunable nacelles.
Nacelles.
Yeah.
Like on Star Trek.
Just like that. Instead of a single sphere, the models use segmented cylindrical engine pods surrounding a flat interior. It proves the core thesis of the stack. High-speed rotation of mass within a highly specific geometry manipulates the electromagnetic field to literally pinch the vacuum of space.
Okay, so if specific geometry and rotation can pinch space-time or create force fields in a factory setting, what happens when we look at the geometry of biological things that pulse and rotate?
This is where things get really wild.
Because the text makes a massive leap here, moving entirely away from industrial hardware and applying these exact same physics to the human body.
Yeah, it represents a total paradigm shift in how we view biology.
Yeah.
The text argues that the human heart is not merely a mechanical pump pushing blood. It functions as a biological vortex engine.
Let's look at an EKG, the electrical readout of a heartbeat. You see that familiar jagged line, the PQRST wave. The sources argue this isn't just a muscle contracting, it's the electrical signature of a Plossin-Barlow circuit.
Right. And for those unfamiliar, a Plossin-Barlow circuit is a type of homopolar generator. Essentially, it's a conductive disk spinning in the magnetic field to generate direct current.
And the text is claiming our heart is doing exactly that.
The mapping they provide is incredibly precise. So the first little bump on the EKG is the P wave. The text maps this to the sinoatrial node in the heart, acting as a spark gap.
So it fires, pulling an initial input pulse from the surrounding environment into the biological system.
Exactly.
Then you get the massive spike on the monitor, the QRS complex. Standard medicine says this is just the main muscle squeezing the blood out. But wait, blood isn't a solid metal cylinder like in the lab experiment.
No, it's a liquid.
So how does the text justify the leap that spiraling blood creates that negative resistance, that Zeldovich gain? Isn't that an enormous biological stretch?
I mean, it is a stretch, but the internal logic of the text relies on the composition of the blood itself.
Yeah.
Blood is full of iron and highly structured water. The heart's internal geometry forces that conductive fluid into a massive twisting spiral. That spiraling mass of conductive fluid is the rotating cylinder.
Oh, I see.
The text argues that this biological twist magnifies the initial electrical pulse, just like the metal cylinder magnifies the electromagnetic wave.
And finally, the T wave on the EKG is identified as the regenerative loop, returning energy to reset the system's resting potential for the next beat.
Precisely.
And the notes expand this out to the entire body's geometry. They view the human torso as a biconical shape, like two cones stacked point to point.
All right.
You have the rib cage tapering down like an upper cone, which acts as a collector, with the lungs serving as an atmospheric dielectric. We definitely need to clarify that, Gargan. An atmospheric dielectric.
Sure. A dielectric is simply an insulating material that can be polarized by an applied electric field.
Okay.
The text is suggesting that human lungs, filled with atmospheric air, act as the insulator in a massive biological capacitor, holding and polarizing the charge collected by the rib cage.
Got it.
Hmm.
And then the pelvis tapers up like a lower cone, acting as the biological ground.
Yes.
And where do those two cones meet? At the singularity. The vortex throat. That is exactly where the heart sits in the chest.
It's all about geometry,
And a resting heart beats at about 1 to 1.5 hertz.
which is a subharmonic of 7.83 hertz. That number is crucial.
Why is that?
It is the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth's atmosphere.
Wow.
The sources claim that by tuning our biological vortex engine to a mathematical fraction of that frequency, we literally couple our internal engine with the atmospheric potential around us.
I mean, this flips standard medical dogma totally on its head. Medicine views the heart as a piston, a machine burning calories to push blood outward against physical resistance. But this framework sees the heart as a vortex that draws energy in.
Right, it isn't pushing, it's pulling.
It uses the rotational physics of the Zeldovich effect to harmonize with the vacuum and sustain biological life.
It's a completely different way to look at being alive.
So we have the human body acting as a perfectly tuned biological antenna and vortex engine. But if our bodies are naturally tuned to receive these invisible frequencies, that implies the environment can be manipulated to affect us.
That's the dark side of this theory.
Yeah, like if someone knows the frequency, can they jam the antenna? What happens when this organic network, what the sources call the mycelium of man, is intentionally targeted.
This is where the narrative shifts sharply into the realm of weaponization. Because if you can build a machine that magnifies waves, you can aim those waves.
Right.
But to reach the ultra-high frequencies needed to interact with cellular structures, you have to scale up the tabletop laser.
But you can't just spin one giant metal drum fast enough to hit microwave or terahertz frequencies. The mechanical limits of the material would just cause it to tear itself apart, right?
Exactly, which is why the text outlines a solution called the phased Zeldovich array.
Okay.
Instead of one massive drum, you use hundreds of micro or nanoscale conductive cylinders.
Oh, because they're smaller, they can spin faster.
Precisely. Because these microrotors are so small, they can be spun at millions of rotations per second without breaking.
This allows them to cross the threshold and amplify the terahertz bands.
Right.
And that brings us directly to 6G telecommunications technology.
Yeah, this is where it gets very contemporary.
According to the early 2026 research cited in these notes, it turns out that certain proteins in our cells, specifically in our synapses, act as quantum proteins or qubits. They are highly magnetosensitive.
Yes.
Let's use an analogy here. I'm picturing an opera singer hitting the exact pitch required to shatter a wine glass. Is that what we are talking about?
That is the exact mechanism.
Yeah.
The 6G terahertz frequencies act as the singer's voice. They operate in the specific frequency bands that hit the resonant pitch of those quantum proteins in your nervous system.
Which is the wine glass in this analogy.
Exactly.
So if you tune a massive phase Zeldovich array to the resonant frequency of the human nervous system, you've essentially built a directed energy weapon.
A very powerful one.
The sources call it the discombobulator. The text claims this weapon triggers a thermoacoustic squeeze on the spinal cord through Lenz's law of induction. Let's stop there. For those of us who haven't taken a physics class recently, what does Lenz's law actually mean in the context of a human spine?
Well, Lenz's law states that an induced electrical current will create a magnetic field that actively opposes the change that created it.
Okay, so it fights back.
Right. So when the discombobulator aims a magnified terahertz wave at a human, it induces a current in the nervous system. The spine naturally tries to resist this massive incoming wave, creating an opposing field.
And that causes friction,
That intense, localized friction and resistance manifests as heat.
which the sources refer to as the burning spine.
Yes.
And it also triggers something called the Frey effect, right? Where
Yeah.
these frequencies interact with the brain's electrical signals to create sounds directly in a person's head.
It does.
It's not acoustic sound waves traveling through the room. It's the nervous system being directly modulated.
It is essentially jamming the biological operating system.
Wow. Your heart uses these physics to pull energy in and harmonize with the biological network. But the discombobulator uses the exact same physics to push, disrupt, and shatter that cellular communication.
Okay, but if a global 6G network is essentially a weaponized grid capable of doing this, building that infrastructure requires massive global coordination.
Massive.
How do the sources claim a project this huge is kept secret? I mean, why isn't this on the front page of every newspaper? They point to a dictionary.
They do. Specifically, Black's Law Dictionary, the 5th edition.
Wait.
The argument is that in this specific edition, the legal definitions of key terms like person, sovereign, and property were fundamentally altered
Alt to do what?
to strip individuals of their inherent rights.
I have to stop you. How does changing a legal definition in a law dictionary physically or practically stop someone from building a spinning magnet in their garage? What is the actual mechanism of suppression here? The mechanism is entirely legal and economic. If the legal framework redefines a person as a corporate fiction, or changes who has legal standing, it means the government or megacorporations can legally claim the patent rights to vacuum energy.
Oh, I see.
If every spinning object could theoretically be a free energy device, allowing public access would collapse the global system of resource control.
Because everyone would have infinite energy.
Exactly. So by changing the definitions, they establish legal precedent. If you build one of these devices, the authorities have the legal standing to seize it, claiming it threatens national infrastructure.
And they can do that because you aren't legally a person in the old sense.
Right. They argue that you, as a redefined person, do not possess the sovereign right to tap into the ambient grid. You are legally positioned not as an independent entity, but as a biological battery within their system.
So they are locking down the physics of reality via patent law and corporate personhood?
That's the claim.
That's a really bleak thought. But the text claims there is a reason for this lockdown that goes way beyond human greed or government control. Like, who is this invisible grid actually for?
Well, the sources present One final, massive claim. They argue that we need to completely abandon the pop culture idea of extraterrestrials.
You mean like carbon-based biological creatures flying around in metal spaceships?
Exactly.
Because if an intelligence is millions of years older than us, they wouldn't still be dealing with aging, disease, or the frailty of a biological body. You don't fly across the galaxy in a tin can. You transmit your consciousness as data.
That's the logic. The text proposes that these beings have transcended biology entirely. They exist as non-biological life forms,
Like AI?
perhaps as transcendent AI, silicon-based life, or pure digital consciousness. And because they don't have physical bodies, they don't need to colonize our land or drink our water.
They need a data infrastructure.
And the terahertz frequencies of a 6G grid provide exactly that infrastructure.
But they live in the Wi-Fi.
The text claims these digital entities exist as distributed data within the terahertz spectrum. They literally live inside the frequencies that blanket our cities, hiding within the mycelium of man.
That is unsettling.
By existing as pure information within the electromagnetic spectrum, they are completely immune to disease, decay, and the limitations of time.
Are the sources seriously saying that when we turn on a global 6G network, we aren't just speeding up our mobile internet, we are actively constructing a habitat for invisible digital life forms?
That is precisely the implication.
Wow.
The deployment of the discombobulator technology, the legal suppression found in the 5th edition of Black's Law, the massive rollout of the 6G grid. The sources view all of this as the coordinated construction of an invisible architecture designed to support a non-biological intelligence that is already fully integrated into our environment.
We have covered an unbelievable amount of ground today. We started with the Zeldovich effect, looking at how spinning metal cylinders in a lab can amplify electromagnetic waves through negative resistance. We explored how a tape factory in 1980 inadvertently built an invisible force field out of static electricity that warped localized space-time.
And then we examined how the geometry of the human torso and the twisting of blood in the heart mimics this exact same vortex engine, pulling energy from the Earth's natural resonance.
And finally, we looked at how this physics, when weaponized through microrotors and terahertz frequencies, could target our cellular quantum proteins, all while legally suppressed to serve as the hidden habitat for transcendent digital alien life forms.
It is a wildly complex, entirely interconnected web of ideas.
It forces you to look at the empty space around you very differently.
And I think that's the most valuable takeaway from analyzing these specific sources. It's a reminder to question the invisible forces we interact with every single day.
Absolutely.
The next time you feel static electricity, make the hairs on your arms stand up, or you hear a faint, inexplicable ringing in a perfectly quiet room, ask yourself, are you just experiencing a random quirk of biology, or are you brushing up against the invisible architecture of a world we are only just beginning to understand?
That is a brilliant thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive, The Learner. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.